Hello everyone, my name is Robert, and today I'm bringing you a chilling and deeply unsettling story. On the morning of July 29th, 2019, Liu Mei, a vibrant 32-year-old woman from Shanghai, embarked on a business trip to Shenzhen, but mysteriously disappeared the next day. What began as a routine trip turned into a nightmare that shocked her family and friends, and ultimately the nation. Stay with me as we uncover the shocking truth behind Liu Mei's tragic death. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Our story begins with Liu Mei, a bright and successful event manager who lived in Shanghai with her husband, Wang Hao. Liu Mei had a promising career in the event management industry. 7 years ago, she had married Wang Hao, a software engineer working for a major tech company. Together, they lived a happy life in a cozy apartment in the bustling city of Shanghai, surrounded by the modern skyline and the historic charm of the old city. On July 29, 2019, Liu Mei was scheduled to fly from Hongqiao International Airport to Shenzhen for a business meeting. Her company had entrusted her with organizing a high-profile corporate event, and Liu Mei was known for her precision, professionalism, and ability to handle even the most complex logistics with ease. After arriving at Shenzhen Bao'an International Airport, Liu Mei hailed a ride using Didi, one of China's most popular ride-hailing services. The driver, Mr. Li, a 22-year-old who had been driving for Didi for less than a year, picked her up in his gray sedan and drove her to the hotel. Along the way, the two made small talk, and Liu Mei, being polite, complimented Mr. Li on his friendly demeanor. At the end of the ride, she casually asked him if he could pick her up early in the morning of July 31st for her return flight to Shanghai. Li agreed to the off-platform deal for 1,000 yuan, and Liu Mei, feeling comfortable with the arrangement, entered her hotel. However, she had no idea that her small act of trust would soon lead her into a deadly trap. Liu Mei's last confirmed contact was a message she sent to her husband, Wang Hao, at 4:43 a.m. on the morning of July 31st, wishing him a good morning and informing him that she would be on her flight later that day. Wang Hao, who had just woken up, replied with a quick message, "Safe travels. I'll see you in the evening. Let's have dinner together." That message would be the last time Wang Hao would ever hear from his beloved wife. As the day progressed, Wang Hao went about his routine, eagerly awaiting Liu Mei's return in the evening. He even left work early, arriving at Shanghai Pudong International Airport to pick her up. However, as the minutes turned to hours, Liu Mei never arrived. The flight she was supposed to be on had landed, but there was no sign of her. Worried, Wang Hao called her multiple times, but each attempt went straight to voicemail. Liu Mei's phone was switched off. He started contacting her colleagues and friends, hoping someone had heard from her. Panic began to set in when none of them had any information. Wang Hao rushed back home and checked her social media and email, but there were no recent posts or updates. Desperation gripped him, and he could feel something was terribly wrong. Late that night, just as Wang Hao was about to contact the police, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. His heart raced as he opened it, only to be hit with a wave of confusion and fear. The message read, "I am in Guangzhou. There's an emergency. Need 500,000 yuan." The broken grammar and unfamiliar tone immediately raised red flags for Wang Hao. This didn't sound like Liu Mei, and why was she in Guangzhou? Her flight was supposed to bring her back to Shanghai, not another city. Trying to keep calm, Wang Hao responded to the message, asking for details, but there was no reply. The phone remained off. His mind was spinning with thoughts. Was Liu Mei in danger? Was someone impersonating her? Was it a scam? He couldn't wait any longer and rushed to the local police station to file a missing person report. At the new Pudong police station, Wang Hao relayed the entire story, including the disturbing message asking for money. The police took the report, but since there were no immediate leads, they were unable to act swiftly. Days passed, and the lack of progress only heightened the family's anguish. While the police in Shanghai struggled to find clues, hundreds of miles away in Shenzhen, an entirely separate incident was unfolding. On the morning of July 31st, around 7 a.m., a group of construction workers near Bao'an International Airport stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Hidden in the bushes near the construction site was a woman's body, her face so brutally disfigured that identification seemed impossible. The Shenzhen police were called to the scene, and a preliminary investigation began. The woman's face had been smashed beyond recognition, and there were no identification documents on her. The police took note of distinctive tattoos on her body and collected her clothing and belongings, but without any immediate leads, they were left with more questions than answers. The woman's body was sent for an autopsy, which revealed that she had been stabbed multiple times, but her face had been crushed with a heavy object post-mortem. As the days passed, the Shenzhen police circulated information about the unidentified woman to law enforcement agencies across the country, hoping to find a match with a missing person report. Back in Shanghai, Wang Hao and Liu Mei's family were in agony. Weeks had passed since Liu Mei's disappearance, and the police still had no substantial leads. Then, on August 16, 2019, the Shenzhen police received a report from the New Pudong police station in Shanghai about a missing woman that matched the description of their unidentified body. Could this be Liu Mei? The police contacted Liu Mei's brother, Liu Jian, to request his presence in Shenzhen for the possible identification of the body. Without informing the rest of the family, Liu Jian flew to Shenzhen the next day. At the morgue, the police showed him photographs of the woman's belongings and tattoos. His face went pale as he recognized a bracelet that Liu Mei always wore, a simple silver charm her mother had given her when she was a teenager. Liu Jian broke down in tears, realizing that the lifeless body lying before him was indeed his sister, Liu Mei. The grief-stricken family traveled to Shenzhen to formally identify her body, and the painful reality of her death settled in. However, there was still one unanswered question. What had led to her brutal murder? Determined to find justice for Liu Mei, the Shenzhen police intensified their investigation. By tracing Liu Mei's phone records, they discovered that her last known location was near the airport on the morning of her disappearance. The breakthrough came when they traced her Didi ride and discovered that her final trip had been booked off-platform. The driver was none other than Mr. Li, the same man who had driven her from the airport to her hotel just 2 days earlier. Using Li's phone signal, the police tracked his movements and discovered that on the morning of July 31st, his phone had been in the same location as Liu Mei's when the ransom message was sent. The evidence was damning, and the police quickly arrested Li. Under intense interrogation, Li eventually confessed to the crime, and his confession painted a chilling picture of greed, desperation, and violence. Li admitted that after dropping Liu Mei off at her hotel, he had become fixated on the idea of robbing her. She had seemed wealthy and successful, and he assumed she was carrying valuable items. The off-platform deal provided him with an opportunity. No official records would track the ride, and if anything went wrong, no one would know he had been involved. On the morning of July 31st, Li arrived at Liu Mei's hotel as planned. She got into the car, exhausted from a long night of work, and quickly fell asleep. Seizing the opportunity, Li drove away from the airport route and headed toward a secluded area. When Liu Mei woke up and realized they weren't heading to the airport, she confronted him, but Li pulled out a knife demanding her valuables. When Liu Mei resisted and tried to escape, Li brutally attacked her, stabbing her multiple times in a fit of rage. After she collapsed, he used a heavy rock to crush her face, ensuring she couldn't be identified. He then fled the scene with her belongings, only to discover that she had very little cash and no valuable jewelry. In a final desperate attempt to gain money, he used her phone to send the ransom message to her husband. Li's arrest brought a measure of closure to Liu Mei's family, but the pain of losing her so senselessly lingered. Her death served as a tragic reminder of the dangers of off-platform deals with ride-hailing drivers, a lesson that resonated with the entire nation. In 2021, Li was convicted of murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence, and was sentenced to life in prison. While justice was served, nothing could bring Liu Mei back. Liu Mei's family was left to grapple with the immense grief of her loss, constantly reminded of how a routine business trip had turned into a tragedy that would change their lives forever. Her husband, Wang Hao, became an advocate for safer travel practices, using his experience to warn others about the dangers of off-platform rides and the importance of following proper safety protocols when using ride-hailing apps. Liu Mei's murder sent shockwaves through China. The media picked up the story, and soon it became a national topic of discussion. News outlets across the country covered every detail, and social media platforms were flooded with comments, expressions of sorrow, and calls for reform. Many were outraged that such a crime could have been prevented if only stricter safety protocols had been in place for ride-hailing services. In response to the public outcry, Didi and other ride-hailing platforms introduced new security measures, including real-time GPS tracking that passengers could share with loved ones, more stringent background checks for drivers, and reminders to customers to avoid off-platform arrangements. Didi also began to roll out new features, such as emergency buttons within the app that could directly connect passengers to the police, and facial recognition for drivers to ensure accountability. Public safety campaigns were launched across the country, encouraging people to follow proper procedures when using ride-hailing apps and never to arrange rides outside of the app itself. The slogan, "Don't bargain with your safety," became a national catchphrase, and many began to reevaluate their habits when using such services. For Liu Mei's family, the pain was immeasurable. Her brother Liu Jian struggled with guilt, feeling as though he should have done more, despite knowing there was nothing he could have done. Wang Hao, her husband, found it difficult to move on. In the weeks and months following Liu Mei's death, he would often sit alone in their apartment, staring at her empty side of the bed or rereading her final text messages. Wang Hao would later share his story with various media outlets, detailing how Liu Mei's tragic end had left a hole in his heart that could never be filled. "I keep asking myself why this happened," he told one journalist. "She was always so careful, but in the end, it was that small decision to trust someone outside the app that cost her everything, and it cost me everything too." For a long time, he couldn't return to the places they had visited together, and the memories of their time as a couple haunted him. To cope with his loss, Wang Hao began attending grief counseling sessions and even wrote a blog where he documented his journey of healing. Over time, his blog grew in popularity, and many readers found solace in his words, as they too had suffered losses of their own. His blog became a community for people dealing with grief, where they could share their stories and support each other. Though the years passed, Liu Mei's story remained in the public consciousness. Schools, businesses, and communities often referenced her case as a reminder to stay vigilant and make safe decisions, especially in everyday situations like hailing a ride. Parents would tell their children about the importance of safety, and whenever news surfaced of similar incidents, Liu Mei's name would be mentioned. For Liu Mei's family, the journey toward healing was long and difficult, but they found some comfort in knowing that her death had led to significant changes in how ride-hailing services operated in China. Wang Hao often reflected on how her death had been a catalyst for positive reform, hoping that it might prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Li, the man responsible for her death, showed little remorse during his trial, and his actions left many baffled. How could someone commit such a brutal act over such a petty amount of money? Psychologists who examined him found that he was deeply troubled and motivated by greed and a sense of inferiority. He had seen Liu Mei as a symbol of everything he could never have: success, wealth, and a better life, and that resentment had driven him to murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that brought some closure to Liu Mei's family, but could never erase the pain of their loss. Despite the tragedy, Liu Mei's life was remembered not just for the way it ended, but for how she lived. Her colleagues, friends, and family spoke often of her kindness, her work ethic, and her passion for helping others. At her workplace, a scholarship fund was established in her name to support young women entering the event management field, ensuring that her legacy would live on through others. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, her family and friends would gather to remember her. Visiting her grave in a quiet cemetery outside Shanghai, they would bring her favorite flowers, light incense, and share stories of her life. Her mother, who had taken Liu Mei's death especially hard, found comfort in traditional Buddhist rituals, praying for Liu Mei's soul and hoping she had found peace in the afterlife. Wang Hao, too, learned to live with the loss, though the pain never truly went away. He eventually moved to a different apartment, unable to bear the memories of their shared home. Yet, he kept Liu Mei's memory alive in small ways, such as visiting places they had once loved together or cooking the dishes she used to make for him. Friends, Liu Mei's story is a heartbreaking example of how a small decision can lead to disastrous consequences. It's important to stay vigilant and prioritize safety, especially when using services like ride-hailing apps. Remember to follow all safety protocols, use official platforms, and avoid making off-platform deals. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments and let us know how you stay safe while traveling. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more real-life crime stories. Don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated on our latest videos. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.